when you get somebody who describes themselves as a conservative today, they're usually somebody coming from orange world-centric values that still feels very close to the importance of non-ethnocentric versions of amber values. And we'll see that's exactly what Jonathan Haidt does when he describes the values that liberals have versus the values that conservatives have. He calls the liberal, well, he recognizes 5 modes, 5 aspects of virtues. And 2 of them liberals have, and all 5 conservatives have. But the 2 that liberals and conservatives have are both universal values. So they want free, whatever it might be. They want all people treated fairly, regardless of race, color, sex, or creed. And that's the way they'll answer those questions. And then they also have another universal one about wanting all people freed of pain, something like that. The conservatives express both of those universals, but they also express values that are, strictly speaking, come from an amber ethnocentric level, such as authority, sanctity, and whatever the other
purity
one
loyalty
is. Yeah. What?
Loyalty.
Right.
Yeah.
All of those are referring, of course, to a group virtue. So the group has sanctity or it doesn't. You're loyal to the group or you're not. And you listen to the authority or the group or you don't. And so that makes it sound like conservatives are fully integral because they have all 5, whereas the liberals only have 2. Now, it's very true that some conservatives do come from integral stages. And they're certainly open to integral intuitions. And I believe Thomas Sowell is one of that. I actually believe all of those Black intellectuals that you mentioned have a bit of an integral intuition in them. And that's why they are not just typical conservatives, which come from orange but embrace amber, which would give their general political atmosphere, but they're coming from teal, and therefore they reach down and embrace them all. So,
yes. Let me ask you a question about that piece, Ken. I'm so glad you mentioned those 5 values. I mean, Haidt even added another one around freedom and liberty or oppression. So there ends up being 6 of those. But when he talks about, certainly on the assessments that he's had people do, conservatives show up strongly on not only fairness and care, which liberals are usually singularly identified with, but what occurs to me and what I would wonder about is, because you watch what happens in today's world with people who are associated with woke progressivism,
right?
They seem to be, even though they wouldn't overtly say out loud if they were asked questions or items on an assessment about things like authority or loyalty or sanctity, purity, that would be shadowy for them, and their responses would reflect that kind of distancing from that. But in actual practice, they tend to be as deferential to their authority leaders in the woke world, as loyal to it, and as pure in the new religion of woke victimhood as anything.
Right. This is what happens there. First of all, you had a question about what on earth is evolution doing with this apparent moving forward and moving backward. And we'll just notice that in terms of eros, or just the general evolutionary push of the universe, it is upward. So if you were just displaying your evolutionary stage of development when you had a political orientation, at amber, you would be old, right, an original conservative, and that means you might have some fair number of homophobic or racist or sexist elements. And then if you were coming from orange, you would be either a new right or an old left. In other words, you would believe in equality and fairness for everybody, and that means equal opportunity. Everybody gets an equal shot at life's goods, but you wouldn't be in favor of equal outcome. That would happen if you were just coming from the green stage. Then you wouldn't even like equal opportunity that much. You would want equal outcome. Because you give people equal opportunity, they'll do something like the Scandinavians, and they'll give men all the STEM fields, and it'll be a disaster. So there's that evolutionary push. Mm-hmm. But let's also remember that Maslow's term for amber was absolutistic, because it takes its truths to be absolutely true. Mm-hmm. And you can't question them. Everything in the Bible is the word of God. You can't question that, and so on. Orange, he called multiplistic, because it starts to actually take multiple perspectives. And that's why we start to get the emergence of science at orange. And that's also why in the same period that humanity finally outlawed slavery, that is from around 1760 to 1860, we also had the first time emergence of the modern sciences that were created by this orange, rational, world-centric mentality. And then the green, he called relativistic, because it basically cuts itself loose from all objective truth, and it wants everybody to be equal. And so the only way you can have everybody to be equal is they all have equal values. They're all egalitarian, and the same is true. So therefore you want to have multiculturalism, you want to have identity politics, and so on, because these are then everybody is said to be treated the same and to have equal values. But now, when any one of those higher stages, multiplistic or absolutistic, are themselves held in an absolutistic fashion, just glommed onto so that they can't be questioned, they're absolutely right, then you'll get a regression to the stage you're comfortable at, which is the absolutistic stage. And this is the problem that we see in the culture wars, and that we see especially with green, is that when you move on to green, you know you're moving to a higher level, you can tell it is, and you start to hold on to that so tightly, you're so sure that that's real, that you take it in an absolutistic fashion, and you'll actually regress to the original ethnocentric stages, or that you'll certainly be open to them in terms of your center of gravity, your cognitive development, and so on. And that's one of the problems, because when you regress to ethnocentric, then you're latching onto its values as if they're absolutistic. Mm-hmm. So in other words, you become essentially the same as the fundamentalist religion.